In this week's video, I'm going to show you my favorite way to keep your airbrush perfectly clean. And this trick is to add distilled water into your paint cup and leave it there in between painting sessions. Now, obviously, you don't want to just leave water in your paint cup and forget about it. This technique only works in between painting sessions, maybe a few hours, or what I do at night when I finish to pick up again the next morning. Now, of course, not everyone is going to agree with this technique, but this is what I've been using for years and it's worked out very well for me. So within this video, I'll show you how I clean my airbrush in between color changes and how I use this one trick to keep my airbrush clean after a painting session. And I just want to say that this has worked out so well for me that I rarely have to deep clean my airbrushes anymore. I only use acrylic paints in my airbrush, so please keep in mind that this video is only for cleaning water-based paints. The first thing I'll use is a towel just to prevent any paint from getting on the surface that I'm cleaning my airbrush on. Spray bottles are one of the best things you could use to flush out any paint in your airbrush. So the first one I have here is filled with just distilled water. And this second bottle is my cleaning solution, which is just a mixture of 40-12 reducer and distilled water. So let's start with the first two, which is cleaning the airbrush in between color changes and then cleaning your airbrush at the end of a painting session. First of all, you want to get yourself any of these airbrush spray out pots. A ton of brands make these. I have a bunch of different ones. They're all very similar to me. And the second thing I like to use is any sort of container that I could use to pour out any paint or cleaning solution. This is just a cheap Tupperware style container that I think I bought at the dollar store, and I just fill it with some paper towels or some shop towels. You'll also want to get yourself some cotton swabs. I like these large ones because they do a great job at cleaning the inside of the cup, but also any of those smaller household Q-tips work fine as well. So this is my very old and reliable Iwata Eclipse. I'm going to fill up the paint cup with some violet acrylic paint made by Createx Illustration Colors. For any painting, this is usually the amount of paint that I have in my paint cup. I don't like to overfill the cup because I feel like it just gets messy and it's a lot harder to clean at the end. And if I run out of paint, it's no big deal. I just put a few more drops in the cup. So that's my first tip for keeping your airbrush clean. Try not to use too much paint in your paint cup unless you absolutely need to. So let's say I was painting with this violet and it's time to swap over to another color. If there's only a small amount of paint left in the paint cup, I'll just spray it in this container until it's empty. And of course, if you have a paint spray out pot like this one, you could just spray out the rest in this. But if you have more than 1 or 2 drops of paint within your airbrush, it's going to take a very long time to spray out. So the easiest solution for me is just to tip my airbrush over this container and constantly spray it out with distilled water. For this first part of just flushing out any excess paint, there's no need to use a specific airbrush cleaning solution. You'll just be wasting it. Distilled water works best here because the goal is just to get out any paint within the reservoir. So after the majority of the paint is flushed out of the cup, I'll just add some more distilled water into it and spray it out into this container until I see that it's clear. And I recommend spraying this out into that spray out pot. I'm just doing it here so you can see what it looks like. And then you just want to make sure that you see the airbrush spraying out clean water like it's doing here, and you don't see any paint in it. And at this point, the airbrush is usually clean enough to swap over to a new color. This is usually where I stop. But if I really want to make sure that the airbrush is clean in between my color changes, I'll just use my cleaning solution. There are a ton of airbrush cleaning solutions on the market. I've used basically all of them. I found this to be my absolute favorite. And it's just a mixture of 50% 40-12 reducer made by Createx and 50% distilled water. So now with this cleaning solution in my airbrush, what I do is unscrew the chuck and then pull back the needle a few millimeters and then tighten it back down. And then what I do is place my finger on the needle cap and just press down for air. This is going to cause that cleaning solution to back flush into the paint cup, and it does a great job of just flushing out any paint that may be in the nozzle. It's very important that you don't fully remove your needle for this part. Just pull it back a few millimeters so that it's still within the body of the airbrush. To show you why this is, let's take a look at an Iwata Custom Micron, since this has a cutout in the body so you can see what's going on. Every airbrush is going to have a screw that holds a small seal, usually made out of Teflon, which is PTFE, and when the airbrush needle slides through it like it is here, it creates a seal that prevents any paint from leaking back into the body of the airbrush. If you fully retract the needle like I'm doing here, you no longer have a seal. So if you back flush any cleaning solution or paint, it's going to push back beyond the cup into the body of the airbrush. Most airbrushes don't have a small cutout or window where you could see that screw, but all airbrushes will have a needle packing screw. If you can't see it, it's no problem. It's just behind the paint cup within the body. So just make sure that the needle of the airbrush is past that screw before you start back flushing it. I usually back flush the airbrush for only a few seconds, and then I spray out the rest into the spray out pot. So at this point, you should have zero paint within the body of the airbrush, and you could swap over to your next color. And as I said earlier, when I'm cleaning out between colors, I mainly just use water. But if you'd like, you want to make sure that there's no residual paint in there, just add some airbrush cleaner, back flush it, spray it out. And at this point, your airbrush is clean enough for color swaps, but I wouldn't put it away like this. So if you're going to stop your painting session, I'll show you what I do right here. The first thing I'll do is remove the needle and just clean off any dried paint that may have built up during the painting session. Any airbrush cleaning solution you have will work just fine for this part. I like to use that mixture of 40-12 reducer and water, and what I do is I just spray it on the end of this cotton swab, and then I just lightly run this over the tip of the needle to clean off any dried paint. Just be careful here not to damage the tip of the needle. It only takes a few seconds to clean the tip of the needle, and this one's ready to go for the next painting session. Now I always recommend fully cleaning out the paint cup with a cotton swab before you put your airbrush away. With the needle fully removed, I tilt the airbrush slightly forward, and then I fill the cup up with my cleaning solution. And then very simple, I take a new cotton swab and rub it around the inside. Paint generally dries within your cup as you're painting, so you're always going to notice some extra paint here at the end of a session. And I found that 40-12 or even 40-11 reducer diluted with some distilled water does such a great job at cleaning out the airbrush. And after you brushed out everything, just add some more of this cleaner to it and spray it right out. And at this point, your airbrush should be very clean, good enough to put away. But as I said in the very beginning of the video, my favorite thing to do is fill the airbrush cup up with some distilled water before I place it back on the holder. And before you do this, make sure you place the needle back in and fully seat it within the nozzle. Again, at this point, there should be no paint left in your airbrush, but sometimes if you're like me, you miss some of it. And if the cup is filled up with distilled water, that paint won't be able to dry. This way, when you start your next painting session, your airbrush is fully clean. All you have to do is dump out the water, spray out any excess. Now, you only want to use this technique if you're going to come back to your airbrush within the next few hours, or if you finish at night and you're going to pick it up again the next morning. Now, I've heard that some people actually like to use reducer for this trick. Just add some reducer in the cup and leave it. I don't like to do that, and I wouldn't recommend it because one, reducer can be pretty harsh and it could start breaking down the chrome a lot quicker than water can. And secondly, a lot of reducers are alcohol based, meaning that they're going to evaporate a lot quicker than water. So for me, I only use water, and I make sure to never leave it in the airbrush longer than 12 hours. If I know that I'm not going to be painting the next day, I'll just skip this step and put the airbrush away dry. Again, this technique is not going to be for everyone. I'm well aware of that. But if you're like me and you're painting every single day, I found it to be very useful. And just an update for the channel, what you're seeing on the screen now is part of next week's painting tutorial. We're going to go back to learning how to paint advanced portraits. I want to wish everyone a very happy new year and a healthy 2023. And I want to say thank you so much to a very generous subscriber who donated $20 to the channel last week as a super thanks. So I want to say thank you to Crazy L for the really generous donation. It's very nice of you, and I truly appreciate it. And of course, I also want to say thank you and welcome to the newest channel member, M Webb, who joined last week as a Tier 3 member. So thank you so much, M, and welcome to the channel. And like always, I want to give a personal thank you to the current channel members. That includes Jabba, M. Shibley, Robert, Ken, Pete, Dwayne, Carl, Michael, Cyril, SM, Mere Creative, Mackie Mark, and Leon. So thanks so much, guys, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you on the members page. So that's it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll be back here next week, and we'll start this new painting tutorial of this woman. And again, have a very happy and healthy 2023.